The phone rang, a jarring sound in the quiet afternoon of my home. My heart at 72 was accustomed to sudden jolts. But this time it wasn't a regular ring. It was a text message. A message from Mark. My son. I put on my glasses, set my now cold Earl Grey tea down on the table beside my old bedside lamp, and slowly opened the message. The words appeared, stark white on the old phone's green screen. Like a knife plunged straight through my chest. Mom, you weren't invited to dinner. My wife doesn't want you there. The air in the room thickened. The wind stopped blowing. The birds chirping outside my window suddenly fell silent. I read the sentence over and over, word by word, as if by reading slowly enough, I could change its cruel meaning. You weren't invited. My wife doesn't want you. My eyes began to blur, but not from tears. It was something hot, something salty welling up from deep within. Anger? Yes, there was that. Sadness? More than I could bear. But above all, a shock so profound it left me numb. My son, he himself had sent these words. The child I had spent my entire life loving, caring for, sacrificing for. The phone slipped from my hand, falling onto the faded old Persian rug. The sound was soft, yet it echoed like breaking glass in my soul. My small wooden house in Willow Creek, where I had lived through so many seasons of rain and sun, suddenly felt strangely cold. Dinner. Family dinner. And I, the mother, was not invited. For what reason? Because my daughter-in-law, Sarah, didn't want me there. I closed my eyes, trying to steady my racing breath. A sense of helplessness crept in. But immediately, a small spark of resilience flickered to life. No. I couldn't just collapse like this. Never. If this story touches your heart, pour yourself a warm cup of tea, sit down comfortably and listen. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this story so you don't miss any other touching narratives. This is the story of Eleanor Vance, and a dinner I wasn't invited to. My life. Eleanor's life began in a tiny town called Willow Creek, nestled among the rolling hills of Georgia. A place where time seemed to move slower, where everyone knew each other's names and stories were told for generations on front porches on hot summer evenings. I was born in the mid-1950s, into a humble farming family, but one filled with love. My father, a man of few words but always with warm, calloused hands, and my mother, a woman with a gentle smile and eyes that held all the worries of life. My youth passed as peacefully as the creek that flowed around town. Early mornings with my father in the fields, feeling the night dew still clinging to the corn leaves. Afternoons. My mother taught me to sew, embroider, and cook traditional Southern dishes. I still remember the smell of her apple pie, filling the kitchen with warmth on special occasions. I grew up with the simple dream of having a small family of my own. A home where laughter always echoed and love was the red thread woven throughout. Then I met Arthur. Arthur was a tall, handsome young man, with wavy brown hair and deep blue eyes that always held a mischievous twinkle. He worked at the Fayetteville Community Bank, not far from Willow Creek. We met at a town dance. He was the only one brave enough to ask me, a shy girl, for a clumsy waltz. He made me laugh. A genuine, heartfelt laugh, something I rarely did before. Love came to us as softly as a breeze sweeping through a wheat field on a July afternoon. Dates under the moonlight, whispered promises of a future, and a romantic proposal under the old 100-year-old oak tree by the town church. We married in the spring of 1975, a simple but warm wedding. My wedding dress was handmade by my mother. Every stitch, every seam filled with love. Arthur was a wonderful husband. He was hardworking, devoted, and always knew how to make me feel loved. We bought a small house on the outskirts of Willow Creek, with a large backyard that I had always dreamed of. A few years later, a miracle came to us. Mark was born. I remember the feeling of holding my tiny baby boy for the first time. A small, fragile life, yet carrying an invisible weight of love and responsibility. Mark was our everything. He had Arthur's bright eyes and my dark, shiny hair. From the moment Mark was born, my life felt like it had put on a new, vibrant, colorful coat. I poured my entire heart and soul into him. From sleepless nights rocking him to sleep, to early mornings preparing hearty breakfasts, to afternoons helping him with homework and playing games. I always believed that a mother must sacrifice. That's what my mother taught me, and I lived by that philosophy. I quit my part-time job at Mrs. Miller's grocery store to dedicate all my time to Mark. I did everything myself to give him the best possible life. New crisp clothes, nutritious meals, bedtime stories. I never complained even when I was exhausted. Seeing Mark's smile, hearing him call Mommy, all weariness seemed to vanish. Arthur was also an exemplary father. He always tried his best to make up for any shortcomings we might have had. Our little family, to me, was a perfect picture. But life is not always bright colors. Arthur passed away from a sudden heart attack when Mark was only 16. It was a huge shock. A heartbreaking pain I never thought I could overcome. My whole world seemed to collapse. I remember those long nights sitting by the window, looking out at the dark, inky night. Tears streaming down my face. But then I saw Mark. He was suffering too, also grieving, but he needed me. I had to be strong for him. I had to be a solid pillar of support for him. I braced myself. I worked extra hours at Mrs. Cooper's bookstore, then came home to take care of Mark. I didn't want him to feel deprived of anything. I still prepared Arthur's favorite meals by hand, still kept our little house as cozy as it always was. Mark grew up, excelled in school, and then was accepted into a prestigious university in the big city. I was so proud of him. I sold Arthur's old car and used my meager savings so he could afford tuition and living expenses away from home. I had no regrets. Every penny, every drop of sweat. It was all worth it when I saw my son thriving. Mark graduated, found a stable job in the city. He started a new life far from Willow Creek and this old mother. We still called each other regularly, but the conversations gradually became less frequent. He was busy with work, with new relationships. I understood. I didn't blame him. I just wanted him to be happy. Then Mark announced he was getting married. The girl's name was Sarah. I was overjoyed. I had imagined a gentle daughter-in-law who would love her husband and care for her mother-in-law. Mark and Sarah's wedding day was a momentous occasion. I wore my best dress, sat in the front row, eyes teary as I watched my son grow up, start his own family. Sarah was a beautiful young woman, with golden hair and sharp blue eyes. She worked in finance, very energetic and confident. I secretly thought my son had made a good choice. Initially, things went quite smoothly. Sarah was polite, spoke softly. We still met regularly on holidays, or when Mark and Sarah visited Willow Creek. But then, gradually, I began to notice small changes. Sarah talked to me less. My stories about life in Willow Creek, about old memories, didn't seem to interest her. She was often busy with her phone, or scrolling through social media while I was trying to chat. Mark also began to change. My son, the child who always cared about his mother's feelings, now became more distant. He called less, asked less about me. My reminders about eating well and staying healthy seemed to only get curt, ahs. Subtle conflicts began to creep in. Sarah started to control everything, from arranging family gatherings to choosing dining locations, even the gifts Mark bought for me. One time, I received an expensive cashmere scarf from Mark for my birthday. I loved it. But a few weeks later, when Sarah and Mark visited, Sarah glanced at the scarf and said coldly, "This scarf is outdated, Mom." I told Mark not to buy it. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. It wasn't about the scarf, but about the way she spoke and how Mark just remained silent. Then Emily was born. My granddaughter Emily, was a ray of sunshine in my life. She had curly brown hair and big, round eyes, sparkling like stars. I loved Emily from the first sight. She was a spitting image of Mark when he was little, and I saw a glimpse of Arthur in those eyes. Every time Emily visited, I felt alive again. I told her the fairy tales I had told Mark, taught her how to bake cookies, and explored my small garden with her. Emily was the last connection between me and Mark's small family. Sarah wasn't too happy when I spent time with Emily. She often reminded me not to spoil her too much. "Mom, don't give Emily too much candy. Mom, don't let her play in the sun too long. Mom, don't tell those outlandish fairy tales." I understood that she worried about her child, but those words felt like needles pricking my heart. I just wanted to love my granddaughter. That's all I wanted to do. Mark and Sarah's visits gradually became less frequent, and when they did come to Willow Creek, Sarah often found ways to avoid me. Or if we did meet, she would just sit silently scrolling on her phone, occasionally glancing at me with an unreadable look. I felt like a burden, an outsider in my own son's family. And then, a few weeks before that fateful text message arrived, I overheard Sarah talking to Mark on the phone, her voice filled with annoyance. "Your mom keeps interfering in everything. I don't want her at our house anymore." I had heard it, but I tried to dismiss it. I thought maybe she was just angry at the moment. Maybe she just said that. I didn't want to believe that my daughter-in-law could say such cruel things about me, and I certainly didn't want to believe that my son would accept it. I still tried to keep things normal. Still called Mark to check in. Still sent him the food he liked up to the city. I still hoped that one day, everything would go back to how it was. Hoped that my family, the family I had spent my whole life building, wouldn't fall apart. Until that text message came. Life, like a woven tapestry, has sparkling threads of joy and dull threads of sorrow. When we are young, we are so busy chasing dreams and ambitions that we sometimes forget that time is a river that never stops flowing. It's only when wrinkles begin to deepen around our eyes, our hair becomes grayer, and our steps are no longer as nimble as before, that we suddenly realize we are old. In America, old age is sometimes a double-edged sword. On one hand, we have freedom. Freedom to do what we like, freedom to travel, to pursue hobbies we didn't have time for when we were busy. I have friends my age, they are still active, still joining book clubs, yoga classes at the Willow Creek Community Center. They still drive to go shopping, still gather for coffee and tell each other small-town gossip. Life seems peaceful, light. But on the other hand, old age also comes with loneliness, especially when children have grown up, started their own families, and their lives revolve around other concerns. In America, not every family has a tradition of 3 generations living together. Children often move out, start careers in different cities. Phone calls become less frequent, meetings become rarer. And then, you realize, the house that once echoed with children's laughter now only has the ticking of a clock and the rustling of wind through the window. It's a harsh reality that many elderly people here face. Not everyone is lucky enough to have a close-knit, warm family. Sometimes, we have to learn to find joy on our own. To fill the voids in our souls ourselves. It could be tending a small garden, reading a good book, or simply sitting quietly watching the sunset. These small things sometimes are the most effective balm for the soul. I once thought that if I sacrificed enough, if I loved enough, that love would be fully reciprocated. I believed that my son would always remember what I did for him. But life taught me a different lesson. Love, sometimes, is not a fair equation. You give, but you don't always receive exactly what you expect. And sometimes your sacrifice is taken for granted, even seen as a burden. I have lived a full life with joys and sorrows. I have loved, lost, and picked myself up again. And now, at this age, I realize that the most important thing is not how much you have given, but how fully you have lived with yourself. You have kept your dignity. Found peace in your soul, no matter what storms life throws at you. That is a lesson I had to pay for with tears and pain to learn. Mark's text message still haunted me. Mom, you weren't invited to dinner. My wife doesn't want you there. It replayed in my head like a never-ending loop. I cried a lot that night, curled up on my cold bed, tears streaming down my wrinkled cheeks. The next morning, I woke up with swollen eyes and a feeling of utter emptiness. But then, as the early sunlight filtered through the blinds, illuminating an old photo of Arthur and Mark when he was little, an idea suddenly sparked in my mind. I couldn't accept this. Couldn't accept being so coldly cast aside from my son's life. After all, I was Mark's mother. I gave birth to him, raised him, and spent my entire life loving him. I couldn't just sit here and endure this humiliation. I had to do something. But what? An angry phone call? A direct confrontation? No, that would only make things worse. I had to maintain my dignity. I decided I would go. Not to argue, not to demand, but to face the truth. To look into my son's eyes. And perhaps Sarah's too. I wanted to know what had made things this way. That dinner was on a Friday. I had prepared a potato and beef casserole, a dish Mark had always loved since he was a child. I spent the entire morning cooking step by step like a ritual. The aroma of beef and spices filled my small kitchen, bringing back distant, peaceful memories. I wanted to bring that dish as a reminder of the years I had cared for Mark, of a mother's unconditional love. In the afternoon, I drove my old Buick along the familiar road leading out of Willow Creek and towards the city. My heart pounded in my chest, a feeling of anxiety, restlessness, but mixed with a strange determination. I didn't know what I would say or what I would face. I just knew I had to go. When I arrived at Mark and Sarah's upscale apartment complex, I parked in a secluded spot, trying to take deep breaths to calm myself. Their apartment was on the 15th floor. I took the elevator, my heart skipping a beat with each floor we passed. When I reached their door, I took a deep breath, then knocked. The sound of the door opening. Mark stood there looking utterly surprised. Mom, what are you doing here? His voice was filled with panic, even a hint of annoyance. Behind Mark, I saw Sarah sitting on the sofa, a glass of red wine in her hand, her eyes looking at me coldly. She didn't get up. Mark, I said, my voice trembling slightly, but I tried to keep it calm. I brought you your favorite casserole. I thought you'd be happy to see it. I held out the insulated container, but Mark didn't reach for it. Mom, you shouldn't be here, Mark said, his voice lowered, seeming awkward. I already told you. He already told you. Eleanor, Sarah cut in, her voice icy. You got the message. You weren't invited. I looked directly into Sarah's eyes. You know, Sarah, I am Mark's mother. I raised him from a tiny baby. I spent many sleepless nights, sacrificed everything so he could be where he is today. And now, you're telling me I'm not invited to my own son's dinner. Sarah stood up, placing her wine glass on the table with a forceful clink. Enough, Eleanor. I'm tired of your complaints. You always think you're the only one who sacrificed. You always go on and on about what you did for Mark. But don't you know? Mark is grown now. He has his own life, his own family. You can't just cling to him forever. Sarah's words were like poisoned arrows, piercing straight through my heart. I looked at Mark, hoping my son would say something, would defend me. But Mark just stood there, head bowed, not uttering a single word. My son's silence was more painful than any of Sarah's words. I'm not clinging, I said, my voice trembling, but I wouldn't allow myself to cry. I just want to be a part of my son's life. I just want to see my granddaughter. My daughter doesn't need a grandmother who constantly talks about the past and gives outdated gifts, Sarah said, her voice filled with contempt. You make her uncomfortable. You make us uncomfortable. We need our own space. Please leave. At that moment I understood. My illusion was completely shattered. It wasn't just about an uninvited dinner. It wasn't just about Sarah's selfishness. It was about the alienation, the cruel indifference from my own son. Mark was no longer the son I once knew. My son had chosen to stand with his wife, against the very mother who had sacrificed everything for him. I looked at Mark one last time, a look filled with disappointment and pain. "Son," I said, my voice barely a whisper, as if I were speaking to a stranger. "I thought I was the most important person in your life. I was wrong." I turned my back, not waiting for Mark or Sarah to say another word. I placed the casserole container on the floor, right outside their apartment door. I didn't want to take it back. It held too many memories, too many false hopes. I stepped into the elevator, without looking back. Tears began to fall as the elevator doors closed. I leaned against the cold wall, suppressed sobs escaping. My heart felt like it had shattered into 1,000 pieces. I had lost my son. Or perhaps I had lost my son a long time ago. Only now the truth was brutally revealed. I drove home in the dark, tears blurring the road ahead. My small house in Willow Creek greeted me with its familiar silence. But this time, the silence was no longer peaceful. It was a heavy silence of pain and loss. I realized it wasn't the dinner that mattered. It was the truth behind it. The truth that my unconditional love had been trampled upon, and I had lost one of the most important parts of my life. After that night, a stillness enveloped me, not the stillness of sadness, but the stillness of a soul that had just weathered a fierce storm and was slowly finding peace again. Tears still fell, but they were no longer tears of despair. They were tears of release, of accepting a painful truth. I realized that I couldn't force love or attention. I had given everything I had. And if that wasn't enough, then it wasn't my fault. Life continued in Willow Creek. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. Instead of moping, I decided to go to the garden. My small garden, where I had put so much effort into nurturing, now became the safest haven. I weeded, watered the plants, and admired the roses blooming in profusion. Every branch, every leaf seemed to whisper a word of comfort. I realized that my life wasn't just about Mark. I still had this garden, my old friends in town, and I had myself. I started to seek out new joys. I joined a gentle yoga class at the community center. At first my body was stiff, but gradually I felt my flexibility return, and my soul felt more at ease. The steady breaths, the graceful movements helped me focus on the present, forgetting my worries. I also signed up for a watercolor painting class. The clumsy brushstrokes at first gradually became more fluid, and I found joy in recreating the beauty of nature on each page. My old friends, Mrs. Clara next door with her endless jokes, and Mr. George, the grocery store owner, who was always willing to listen to my woes, became true confidants. We drank coffee together, walked around Willow Lake together, and shared our thoughts, our anxieties of old age. I realized that true friendship is also a priceless gift. And then a miracle happened, not from Mark or Sarah, but from Emily. Occasionally, Sarah still brought Emily to visit Willow Creek. I no longer expected a call or an invitation from Mark. But every time Emily came, she would rush into my arms, hugging me tightly. "Grandma, I missed you so much." Her clear voice was like a magic elixir, healing every wound in my heart. I still told Emily fairy tales, still baked cookies with her, and explored the garden with her. I didn't need any approval from Sarah or Mark anymore. Just Emily's smile was enough. My granddaughter, that ray of sunshine, was still the most precious connection. Life had taught me a profound lesson. To love does not mean to sacrifice yourself to the point of exhaustion, to the point of losing your own self-worth. True love is when you maintain your self-respect, earn the respect of others, and learn to love yourself first. You cannot fill someone else's cup when your own is empty. If Eleanor Vance's story has touched your heart, if it has made you reflect on family relationships and self-worth, please hit the like button, share this story with your loved ones, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any other touching stories. Who knows, maybe someone else out there needs to hear this story today, to find empathy and the strength to move forward. Thank you for listening to Eleanor's story. I wish you a meaningful and peaceful day.